you tour the mill. Where are you from?
Oh, Miami, and I live in Queens.
Miami and Queens. A little bit of a difference.
Staten Island.
Staten Island.
Rochester.
Rochester. My father was born in Rochester. Now, you just came out of the house. You know a little about the Phillips family. To put it all in perspective, the Phillips family is probably the wealthiest family in the original 13 colonies. If I had to equate them to anybody, see, there goes my whole tour.
I'm sorry.
I can't tell if that I'm not even bothered to look.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
Fred or Fred. I don't know.
Kitty.
They were the wealthiest family in the original 13 colonies. They would equate today financially to someone like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. The reason why I mention that, if you're not from this area, which you're not, this is Westchester County. Westchester County today is in the top 5 wealthiest counties in the United States. This one family owned 1/3 of the county. They owned over 52,000 acres of land. They had 11 to 1,500 tenant farmers working the land for them. They were in the slave trading business. They had 23 enslaved Africans on site. And they had vast political connections. The only way to think of them is Dutch entrepreneurs way ahead of their time. They were master traders. They would trade for material goods all over the world. And every time they made a trade, they made sure they made a profit. Now, one of his big money makers was wheat. And you'll understand as the tour goes on why wheat was so important to him. But wheat has no value unless you can turn it into wheat flour. And you need a mill to do that. But before you can even put a mill up, you've got to have a water supply. The water behind you is a river, the Canico River. It starts up north. It's all fresh water. Once the water falls over the dam, the water becomes brackish, part salt, part fresh. This is an estuary. This flows in from the Hudson River. By the way, the Hudson River is salty as far north as the Newburgh Beacon Bridge. So if you could stand down at the very tip of Manhattan and look probably another 20 miles north of there, that's all salt water. That's where the tidal change comes, about 20 miles north. Now he's got the water, but he's got to capture it. He's got to make it work for him. If you look over the fence, you'll see a long wooden box, which is called the flume. That's filled with water. Well, it should be filled with water, but you can see they're down on water. Now, the box is normally filled with water, and that's the energy source. When you mix the water, you hit the big wheel at the end, and the thing's running. Unfortunately, we build a job where you don't have enough water. You can imagine the amount of water you need. That wooden wheel out there weighs over 1,000 pounds. That wheel has to turn a shaft which weighs over 5,000 pounds. And that shaft has to turn a stone, one of which weighs 2,400 pounds. So you need a massive amount of water. And you're solely dependent upon Mother Nature. Yes.
Well, I was going to add, so back then, back in the 1800s, there was enough water?
1688. Yeah. Well, again, was there enough water? Yeah, depending on Mother Nature. If she gave us rain, you had enough water. If there was a drought, you didn't have enough water. But going back to when the Phillips put this mill in, the water was originally as high as the river. The mill, of course, the wheel was a lot higher, and so was the flume. So-called progress over the course of time changed the whole size and shape of this river. They put in filtration plants up north, they blacktopped the roads, but the biggest change came in the far corner of this property, about 1.5 miles, 2 miles down. There's a defunct General Motors plant. In its day, that was the largest truck producing plant in the United States. Before they put that plant in, they diverted the size of the river. They wanted to put, the river came through the property they wanted, so they changed the size and shape of the river, thus causing it to change. It was a lot wider, it was a lot deeper. Let's take a look inside. I guess questions, please ask me. thousands of years ago. If you go back to the Greek, Roman, Phoenician Empire, you're milling in one way, shape, or form. I mean, probably the earliest forms of milling was with the old pestle and mortar. What I just put the corn in, that's called a quern, Q-U-E-R-N. Anybody's into Scrabble, you got a new word starting with the letter Q. Okay, now that's could be a mill in your own household, could be in your village, depending on the size of the family. And it's basically a simple one. It's all operated by hand. The idea is to grab this, turn it, and you grind out either wheat or corn. You're certainly welcome to try it. And you don't want to push, you want to pull.
Oh.
So you're coming this way. You want to stand on this side. Bend your knees.
I'm pretty strong.
Also, you gotta move. Yeah, once you get that is.
Until you get to
I'm
here.
going to tell you that is very good.
That's very good?
Very good.
Okay.
Because
I'm pretty strong. My
this
upper
weighs
body.
210 pounds on 210 pounds with just a slight gap in between. Most, when I ask anyone who wants to try, I've been doing this tour many, many years. Usually the women will step forward, the men will. We do have fun with this because normally towards the close of the school year, the high school kids come in and they do field trips. And the young men who are seniors, 16, 17 years old, usually come in with their muscle shirts on. And they want to impress the young ladies that they're with. So we have a very bad habit of loading this to the very top. So they'll come in, do a little flexing, and we have a nice quiet tour after that. No, the Phillips realized, this goes back a few thousand years, the Phillips realized with a method like that you're never going to make money. So they brought in these large stones. Again, the technology started in Europe, so we were bringing in the stones from Europe. Eventually, we quarried our own. This particular stone weighs 2,400 pounds, comes in 5 pieces. Fred or Ginger, whoever you are, it comes in 5 pieces. You'll see examples of pieces along the column there. What they would do is, they bring these pieces in, you fit them together like a puzzle. Then you call a blacksmith in. He takes this metal banding or strap and he fires that up red hot. When metal gets hot, it flexes a little bit. You slip it over the outside of the stone, and when metal cools down, it contracts and pulls tight. This white on the bottom, which eventually becomes the top, is plaster. So it's a combination of metal banding and plaster holding 5 pieces of 2,400 pounds of stone together. Now, when the Phillips had this mill, they had 3 sets of running stones in here. With 3 sets of running stones, they did grind out 5,000 pounds of wheat flour per day. They worked a 10-hour day, the slaves. They worked 6 days a week. At the end of the week, they were pushing out of this mill over 30,000 pounds of wheat flour, and this was a small mill. They owned a larger mill in Yonkers, a half hour away. Bottom line, they had a monopoly on all the wheat coming out of this area, and as I said earlier, wheat was money to the Phillips. Now, in order to grind, one stone has to go on top of the other. 2,400 pounds, never lift by hand. This is called a stone crane and jack. If I were to swing this whole unit, it would swing until it's across the top of the stone. Then these jaws open wide. And you see little hook ends on the end of the jaws. There are matching holes on both sides of the stone. It took 4 slaves, Caesar, Flip, Tom, and Diamond were their names. They put a hook in each hole. Envision, if you would then, this stone now this way. They would bring it over here, then they would push it down here. There's normally a metal piece sticking out of here. You put that top stone on the metal piece, and then you put a wooden tub around it. And the reason why you put a wooden tub around it is so when you're grinding, your meal doesn't fly all over the place. Now, when you were in the house, you heard the name Albert Artsy. Albert Artsy was the overseer, the manager for the Phillips. The Phillips spent very little time here. This was big business for them. Now, he was in charge of all the tenant farmers that were here. He was also in charge of the slaves that were here, the 23 enslaved Africans. Now, the representative for the slaves was the master miller. His name was Caesar. Slaves, as you know, had no rights at all. They were told what to do, when to do it, and you better do as you're told. But just once in a while, they might have a chance to negotiate. Let me give you an example of what I'm saying. Albert Artsy, the representative for the Phillips, would come over to Caesar and he'd say, look, Caesar, the Phillips are going to be here next week. Instead of giving me 5,000 pounds of wheat flour per day, give me 5,500. Give me an extra 500 pounds. While the boss is here, it makes me look good. Caesar said, no, I can't do that. And Artsy says, well, what do you mean? No, you're a slave. You do exactly as I tell you to do. He says, well, normally I could, but my best worker is a man named Samson. He's down at the other mill in Yonkers. He hasn't seen his wife and children in over 3 years. I can't get him to work anymore. He doesn't care what happens to himself. So Artsy would say, look, if I can get him a pass that he can go and see his wife and children, you think he'll get me the extra 500 pounds? And Caesar would say yes, and the slaves would break their back and get him that extra pounds. But folks, the key thing here is a pass. It's a piece of paper that says, I, Albert Artsy, do hereby release this man. He will leave on X date. He will go to the lower mill in Yonkers, and he will return on X date. Lose that piece of paper. Have that piece of paper stolen from you. You're a runaway slave. You're subject to the punishment of runaway slavery. Any one of you can get in your car right now, drive to Yonkers. Nobody's going to say where you're going, when you're coming back, or do you have any papers. But the other thing to think about is, how does he get there? There are no cars. He doesn't own a mule. He doesn't own a horse. So he's got to walk from here to Yonkers and back. So was it a negotiation?
Right.
In words only. There was always a hook on the end of it. As a tenant farmer, which if you lived here, that's what you would be, you would bring your grain in sacks. The sacks would be stored upstairs. Upstairs is a large granary again. And it would be brought down by simple gravity into this box, which is called the hopper. Below the hopper is a horse. Below the horse is a shoe. Folks, all this paraphernalia does one thing and one thing only. If this were not here, the master miller would have to sit here and spoon it in, little at a time. This does it semi-automatically. But what makes this unique is there are little sticks inside here that control the flow of grain. If too much grain falls into my stones, I choke them. They won't move. If too little grain falls in, I have nothing to grind. So little sticks control the flow of 5,000 pounds of wheat flour per day. We use that same method today. Now, we were able to grind. This is what we need grinding. This is red wheat seed. So when it comes out at the other end, it is not white flour because you're grinding seed and all. It has a brownish cast to it. So upstairs is my granary floor. The floor we're on now is called the stone floor. We're going to go down 4 short steps and talk about the grinding floor. Before we go down, anybody have any questions?
Are these original? Is this original stone?
No, it's not originally because stones do wear. You can, or they could have brought in one solid piece, but the only problem with bringing in one solid piece, remember it weighs 2,400 pounds. You're on a wooden sailing vessel. Your sailing time from Europe to the New World was probably 5 or 6 weeks, depending on the wind and tide. If a stone ever broke loose, put a hole in the side of the ship, you know the old saying, the millstone around my neck? That's where it originated from. Eventually, we did quarry our stones here. A stone will probably last, since the Phillips were running 6 days a week. A stone has to be refinished. That means roughing up the surface of the face of the stone every 5 to 6 weeks. And it took the master miller 15 hours to finish up one set of stones, and he had 3. The running time for a stone, or total until it was totally shot, was probably about 10 years.
I don't have any.
Okay.
You're not going to get fed.
Okay, okay.
4 short steps to my neck.
Property around.